Welcome to ISE's FX Options Weekly Outlook, a weekly outlook on the US dollar versus the major currencies, hosted by Jason Ayres, a top industry instructor and founder of OptionSource.net. Learn to trade your views on the strength or weakness of the US dollar.
Well, hi there, and welcome to the FX Options Outlook for the week ending June 27th. I'm your host, Jason Ayres, founder and president of OptionSource.net, and thank you very much for joining me today. The ISE offers 6 major currency pairs, each using the US dollar as the base currency. And as you can see here, you can trade your views on the US versus the Canadian dollar, the US versus the yen, US versus euro, US versus pound, US versus Aussie dollar, and US versus Swiss franc. Tonight we're going to look at the CDD, which is the US versus Canadian dollar, the YUK, which is the US versus the Japanese yen, the EUI, which is the US versus the euro, and the BPX, which is the USD versus the Great British Pound. You can use the ISE symbol to view the price chart through your current charting software provider. The specifications of each currency pair is very simple. For our US versus Canadian dollar, we simply take the spot market value and multiply it by 100. So if we're looking at a spot market value of 0.9845, we simply multiply that by 100 to get our currency pair value. And as you can see here, the only one that we will not be multiplying by 100 is the US dollar versus the Japanese yen. In the case of the US dollar versus the euro, the US dollar versus the Great British Pound, and the US dollar versus the Australian dollar, the charts will appear inverse from the spot market, since in the spot market, the euro, the pound, and the Aussie dollar are both the base currencies. As always, we're going to have a look at our weekly US dollar index. The US dollar index gives us a perspective as how the US dollar is performing against a basket of currencies. We suggested a couple of weeks ago that the US dollar may have the potential for moving higher into the 75 range here based on a breakout of a previous pivot point. Last week we suggested that there was some indecision taking place, and as you can see, it actually broke back down in. Last week, we saw the US dollar break down even further. It now appears that we're forming what we refer to as a bear flag, which is leaving the window open for a continuation to a test down into the 71 point range. Both our RSI and our MACD are suggesting some weakness. So we want to keep this in mind when we're looking at the performance of the next few currency pairs that we'll be reviewing. We're going to first take a look at the CDD, the US versus the Canadian dollar. We had a significant pullback off of that 103 level that we've been identifying the last few weeks. We suggested that it was likely going to find some consolidation at the 101.5 level, and this bullish candle right in here suggested that there was a little bit of an indecision with respect to the direction that it wanted to go. We did suggest that on a break of that 101.5 support that we would likely see the price play down into the 100 range. One thing that's interesting to notice at this point is that we're actually finding some support at a 50% retracement of the previous level here, in which case a rally back into that 101.5 range seems like a likely thing to happen. However, if that level at the 100.5 does not hold, both our MACD and our RSI are suggesting that a break of that 101 or 100.5 is likely to see a continuation down into the 100 level. The YUK, the US versus the Japanese yen, we'd seen a significant rally into a resistance and suggested that the likelihood of a pullback was high. We saw a pullback and then a retest of that 108 level. We did suggest that a break of that 108 would likely see the prices play into the 110. We did not see that. Instead, what we saw was a break below our previous pivot at the 107 and a nice little drop down to the support level that we'd identified at the 106. Currently, we are seeing a little bit of support develop in this area here, and if that holds, we're likely to see a retest of the 107. In saying that, both our MACD and our stochastics and our RSI are suggesting that prices want to continue down, in which case we would likely see a play down into the 38% retracement, which is a measured move of the previous uptrend. The EUI, the US versus the Euro, we saw an attempt 3 times to break above that 65.5, and each time it seems to play back down into the 63.5 level. So we seem to be developing a little bit of a channel here. Now, in saying that, if we find some support here at the 63.5, then a pushback up to retest that 64.5 is quite likely. So an opportunity here on a consolidation to buy some call options on a bounce off of the support level is worth looking at. Both our MACD and our RSI, however, are suggesting that there's still weakness in this pair, and that a break below that 63.5 is likely to continue all the way down to the 62.5 level. The BPX, the US versus the British pound, saw a nice little double top form here. And our suggestion last week was that it was likely to find some consolidation with the high probability of retesting the 51, which actually played out perfectly. We did have a bounce off of that 51 resistance down into the 50.5. It's actually since broken through there, which is a very significant support level. We're finding a little bit of support, or we will find a little bit of support likely at the 50 price range in here. However, if we get a retest of that 50.5, a break below that level, which is looking like the path of least resistance based on our MACD and RSI, would suggest a test all the way back down to the 49.5. Well, that's been your FX Options Weekly Outlook. As always, I'm your host, Jason Ayres. Thank you very much for joining me. We'll see you here next week.
Thank you for participating in this week's session. Please join us again next week. For more information about Jason Ayres and to sign up for free FX Options trade alerts, just visit www.optionsource.net. To learn more about ISE FX options, including our weekly webinar series, visit us at www.ise.com/fx. ISE FX options can easily be traded through all options-enabled brokerage accounts. These exchange-listed securities are cash-settled in US dollars and have a European-style exercise.